As soon as you hop into, I make these faith positions about human nature being, I want to be fulfilled, I want to have satisfaction, I believe I reason, like you're reasoning right now, I believe that humans have value, I believe that I have a free will. Now you're stepping outside of what an atheist is supposed to be consistent with when it comes to their worldview.
A lot of philosophy, and I feel like I get everything I need from philosophy, from existentialism specifically, in order to live a happy and meaningful life. So personally, I feel satisfied in basically every way, shape, and form how I'm living my life, and so I don't know why I would go out and seek out another meaning for life.
How are you so happy as an atheist? You have no objective meaning and purpose. You have no objective morals for really knowing right from wrong. All of your family members are going to pass away, and your friends, in a short life, which will be very painful for many of them, and you will never see them again ever. They're going through a trap door to non-existence. With all of that in mind, how do you live such a happy existence other than one where you're denying these facts?
If there's no meaning in life, if there's no path I specifically have to follow, then I can choose my own path. And that path that I choose is the ultimate meaning, because it's what I chose, and I'm living authentically to myself.
What does authentically mean?
Authentically means I'm not accepting another worldview that was pushed on me, but I have my own worldview, and I'm living that way.
I have my own worldview. Nobody pushed a worldview onto me. I have my own worldview as an atheist, and I'm the free thinker. That is ridiculous, because you came directly from Hume, directly from 200 years ago. The reason why you're an atheist is because you are a white male pushed on you by highly enlightened thinking to be a free thinker. You are a construct of your time, of your race, of your gender, studying philosophy at this fine school. In no way are you somehow more enlightened as a free thinker than somebody who has been pushed a worldview upon. You have a worldview, my friend. I'm sorry. Atheists try and get out of this. It's like one big celebrity atheist we were debating not too long ago. Originally it was evidence for God. That's the debate. But then he changed it to strong evidence for God. And he just kept moving the goalposts. He said, you know what? Nope. I want it bigger. I want more evidence, more evidence, more evidence. Then I'll come to know God. Endless amounts of evidence. It's like Richard Dawkins. Originally, he wanted God to write his name in the stars, but then he said, no, that wasn't enough. He wanted God specifically to speak to him. But then he said, you know what? I could be hallucinating. That's not enough. And he just kept moving the goalposts. Hyper-skepticism. Don't be that way. Understand that you are influenced just as much as anybody here who has a specific worldview.
I am a product of my environment, and the reason why I'm an atheist is because my parents were atheistic, and they pushed that worldview on me. But then I accepted that worldview, and I found happiness in that worldview because, again, I was able to create my own meaning, and I enjoyed that. Just like if someone else is a Christian, and it's because their parents were Christian, and because of that they studied Christianity, and they were Christian, and were very satisfied with that view, then they're living authentically as well. But if someone is unsatisfied with Christianity and still lives as a Christian, then that's inauthentic. If someone is unsatisfied as an atheist and they still live as an atheist, then that's inauthentic. So I'm just someone who wants...
It has nothing to do with satisfaction. I think satisfaction can be part of it, but no, never accept a worldview or a religion or an anti-religion based off of it makes me happy. I'm sorry, that does not align yourself with being a truth seeker. Sorry, it doesn't. It just aligns you with being comfortable. If you're going to say that you're an honest truth seeker, you're not just going to say, well, because atheism makes me comfortable.
So why are you an atheist?
Well, I feel like how he said, I am a product of my environment to a degree, but at the end of the day, to a degree, at the end of the day, I do choose to still be an atheist. Every day I wake up, I still say, I'm satisfied that this world is cold and meaningless, and I get to choose my own meaning, and I get to be fully satisfied in my choice being the ultimate meaning for me.
Okay. So how can you say you're totally satisfied? I mean, I'm creating this illusion that my life has this meaning, that if I choose to the opposite for tomorrow, that's just as true, it's just as real.
Well, I feel fully satisfied because I think that everyone ultimately picks some, as I said, I believe that the world is meaningless and that there ultimately are no true religions. So I think everyone does choose some meaning that they ascribe to their life. And I think that if I were to switch up my meaning tomorrow, then I wouldn't be living authentically myself. But if my meanings gradually change as I learn more, then that would be authentic to myself. And so it's true that it's my meaning because I chose it was my meaning and I could change that meaning.
Right.
But that still doesn't mean I chose it because of my own choice. And that's essentially all that matters. As long as I'm choosing out of my own decision what my meaning of life is, then I feel satisfied with that.
Okay. If there is nothing more to reality than matter and energy, are you sure you've got a free will?
No.
Thank you. So when you talk about my own choice, what are you really talking about?
My own illusion of choice, I would say.
Boy, you're a delight to talk to. You're consistent. It's your own illusion of choice that you're referring to when you say, I choose. Because if there is no God, reality is matter and energy evolved to a higher order, which means there's no me, there's a complex chemical reaction, but there's no free will where I make a choice. I just live out the chemical reactions in my brain. We agree?
Yes.
Okay, good. Here's why I can't accept that worldview. Because I experience free will.
Yeah.
Not only that, I observe free will. I observe a mom and a dad who got 4 precious little kids, and at some point, those 4 precious little kids are going to tell mom and dad where they can step off. All right? It's going to happen. Hate to tell you, mom and dad, but we got 3 kids and 6 grandkids, and they've told us where we can step off plenty of times. So this whole idea that we don't have free will, oh no, sir, we do. In fact, I'm so committed to free will that I support the legal system in this country, which tells me, Cliff, if you take up a bunch of big books and hit this man over the head with them, we're going to haul you into court. And if I say to the judge, Your Honor, this man just so reminded me of my father. My father had the same type of receding hairline. He had the same type of build. That when I saw this guy, he just so reminded me of my abusive father, I had to hit him. Fortunately, we live in a culture, a society that says, no, I'm sorry, Cliff, I'm sorry that you had that abusive father, but when you hit him, you are responsible. And to blame your abusive father for hitting him, sorry, I'm real grateful for that. Aren't you?
Yeah, I think that free will is important. I also have a minor in crime and justice, so I know
Good.
that speaking in terms of criminology, there has to be some kind of free will. I personally still think it's an illusion in the sense that our experience, our day-to-day experience, you kind of need something like free will in order to understand it. However, criminology is about looking at someone's upbringing, it's about looking at someone's past traumas, it's trying to scratch at that deterministic underlying foundation by saying if we can know more about it, we can get close to predicting the future.
Okay. So we make a distinction between a chemical imbalance in the brain that leads to insanity versus me being sane and choosing to murder him. We make a distinction, don't we? Okay. So if you're normal, if you're healthy, you are responsible for the way you treat each other. And I got grossed out at the University of Arizona when a student raised his hand and said, yeah, I date rape. And I said, really? And why do you date rape? And he said, because I have a very high testosterone level. That's a con job. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'd agree with virtually everything you said, except just the difference is that I feel like I have a free will rather than I have a free will, which I do think that's still, as I said, our day-to-day experiences, since we don't know every single causal chain that happened since the beginning of the Big Bang, and we can't access that knowledge and predict every single event that's going to happen afterwards. We might as well accept that since we don't know everything, since we're not omniscient, there's this thing called free will that is present basically due to a lack of knowledge. If you knew that person's high testosterone, if you knew everything about every single neurochemical that was firing in that person's brain at that very moment, and every single moment in his life before that moment, then you could predict exactly why and when he date raped. But we don't know that, so we have to put some of the responsibility on him.
So when she says to you, "I love you," you know exactly what she means, right? You don't understand the complexity of it, but you know very, very well that she doesn't love you. Instead, there's a chemical instinct inside of her that...
That's all there is to every feeling. So everything's on that same level playing field. If love is just a chemical in our brains, well, everything is a chemical in our brains. Perception is just a chemical in our brains. Hate is just a chemical in our brains.
Yeah.
So to say that love is just a chemical in our brains doesn't actually make it any lesser than anything else.
But my experience of life is, you know, I might not want to forgive him. I might want to hate his guts for the way he hurt me. But I'm going to choose to forgive him. Instead of everything in my mind is going, Rocky, 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 blast this dude into the next generation for what he did to me. Instead, I'm going to choose to forgive him. I'm sorry, sir. That's my experience of reality, and you ain't going to convince me your experience is any different. I think you're playing a game, and you're consistent intellectually, and I respect that, and I thank you for being so consistent. But I don't think you can live that out. I don't think you're going to say to the girl who says, "I love you," yeah, the chemicals are just firing in the right way for my benefit. I think you're going to know, whoa, she's choosing to love me. I'm excited. I'm ecstatic. She's choosing to love me. Wow. You know something? If you tell me this dad and this mom have to care for these 4 precious kids, I'm going to tell you, you've never met a deadbeat dad and a deadbeat mom. Because when you meet a deadbeat dad and a deadbeat mom, you know that these two don't have to care for these precious children. They choose to care for them. They choose to sacrifice for them. And that's one of the reasons I respect them. And the reason I don't respect a deadbeat dad is because he doesn't have to ignore his children. He chooses to ignore his children. That's why I'm going to hold him responsible. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so Jesus Christ bleeds and dies on a cross, claiming to do that for our making irresponsible decisions, sin. He's buried in the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. 3 days later, he rises from the dead, and over a period of 40 days, he appears to over 500 people who see him risen from the dead. He says, if you want to be tied to God and have eternal life, believe in me. Do you think you might believe in him one day?
No.
Okay, why?
Well, again, I feel like I'm still fulfilled and satisfied with my current belief. And I also feel like, I do feel like just the idea that there's 2.6 billion Christians on this world and there's 8 billion people on this world, I think, like, why should I value Christianity much more than Islam or much more than Hinduism?
You shouldn't. You're right. But Jesus Christ, he's different. He was dead, and he rose from the dead. That resurrection makes the dude weird, really weird. And by gollies, if he really did rise from the dead, we better put our faith in him, hadn't we?
I don't think he rose from the dead.
But if you find out that he did rise from the dead, you'd be open to putting your faith in him, maybe.
Yes.
All righty. Now, just please read the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. You're going to be critical about them, and I don't blame you. I hope you are. I hope you're not going to blindly believe. So you're going to come up with some tests that you use to determine historical reliability. Use those tests on Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and if the evidence is that you can trust them historically, then just read the Gospels as history, not as the Word of God. Just read them as history, and ask yourself, does the historical evidence of his life, teachings, death, and resurrection point to his reliability, or does it not? And if you find the historical evidence is he is reliable, make your own decision to trust in him. Not blindly, but based on his lifestyle, teachings, death, and resurrection.
Authentically, yeah.
Bingo, authentically, exactly. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, and I mean, I do think that if God was to come down right now and
Yes.
show me that he existed, then I would convert. If I could have some kind of evidence, then I feel like that's why a determinist who's an atheist is because the evidence that I feel like I've seen while I haven't read the Bible, I mean, I've done a fair bit of philosophy of religion and theology research, but you're right, I haven't read the Gospels and then gone, okay, I'm not going to believe that.
Right.
But I do feel like I would need that evidence, that historical evidence that someone did break every single law of science and resurrect from the dead.
Ooh, okay, good. Okay, I'm going to get Stuart go pretty soon, talk with you. But you're a delight, first of all. Thank you. All right? And I mean that. Thank you for talking with us. Okay, so I'm going to take a quick shot at that idea. Okay. God, if you exist, bingo, right now, I want to hear the voice from up there. And I got to audibly hear it. Okay, that's a dangerous game. That's very similar to the guy who looks into the face of the girl who says, I love you, and says, oh yeah, prove it, have sex with me. And if you don't have sex with me, you don't really love me. You see, we can't demand that another person express their love for us or that they're really real by playing that type of game, of putting up those demands. You know, I've got to allow you to reveal yourself to me as you choose, not as I dictate. Well, the same with God. I can't say, hey, God, you got to meet these tests in order for me to believe in you. He's interested in your love because he loves you, which means he's a personal God, which means he's not just interested in an intellectual game where we sort of say, yeah, God exists, I believe it. No, he's interested in us trusting him. And the universe is not religiously ambiguous. There's more than enough evidence for any thinking person to believe that God exists. But God is not going to overwhelm you by slapping you up on the side of the head and saying, dummy, I'm here, believe in me. He became a human being. He lived a sinless life. He died a sacrificial death on a cross. He rose from the dead. Gosh, it's in living color. I love you. Does that make sense?
I think so. I mean, kind of another side point, but I feel like the argument that you're making is that Jesus has shown that he loves us. God has shown that he loves us.
Yeah.
But I think there's that same exact statement from many other religions, from the Buddhists, from et cetera, et cetera. So what you're saying is that because Jesus resurrected from the dead, he is above all those other religions, or at least Christianity.
He's more reliable.
More reliable, yeah.
Okay, but sir, study Buddhism. It's impossible in Buddhism for God to love you because God is not a personal being. It takes a personal being to love. Siddhartha Gautama Buddha never once talks about God. Talks a lot about nirvana, karma. Took Siddhartha Gautama Buddha 547 rebirths to eventually attain nirvana. But there's no personal being.
So you're saying that love with a personal being is what sets apart a religion, namely that one.
Exactly.
As the true religion, or the best religion.
I'm saying if there's not a personal being, there's no love. Impossible for this thing to love me. It takes a personal being with a free will to love me. In Buddhism, no personal being, no personal God, love is impossible. Now, please don't leave, but Stuart, what do you have to say?
That's a quick question.
You've been listening well?
So you use your five senses to get to this conclusion, right? Okay, well, if an immaterial God has nothing to do with our five senses in terms of locating him, how did you use your five senses to decide that this God is not real?
Well, I would argue that to someone who has taken faith up in Christianity, they've used their five senses to not believe in the other 299 religions. Yeah. So I'm the same as that, except I just chose to not believe in one more.
That doesn't answer the question. That's a red herring, I think. That didn't answer it. How did you, because you said based off your five senses, how have you gotten to this certainty that God does not exist, who you cannot connect with your five senses? So philosophically, because you love philosophy, I'm going to press you on this. How have you gotten to that point?
I mean, yeah, in philosophy, for example, René Descartes talks about how all that is truly certain is I think, therefore I am. And
I think it's I choose, therefore I am, in today's day and culture.
Okay, yeah. But even that, the skeptics have criticized that because it presupposes an I that exists. I mean, you can really go level after level and doubt absolutely everything.
Yep.
So I feel like...
So I hope you doubt your doubt as well.
Yeah, you have to. So the reason why I'm not a Christian is, well, because to me, believing in things that I can use with my five senses and nothing else works just fine for my day-to-day life. So not believing in Christianity or any of the other religions doesn't actually negatively impact me, at least from my perspective, which is why I would say I'm not a Christian.
Okay, but still, I look at empirically verifiable things that are physical. But I have so many faith jumps I have to take to assume different understandings of human nature. Does that make sense? Do you agree with that? You have faith as well.
Yeah, and to a degree, science takes faith. I'm taking faith on Stephen Hawking when he talks about I've never actually measured the exact things that he's measured. I've never exactly measured the same things that Charles Darwin has measured when I believe in evolution.
Yet again, immaterial.
Yeah, and
they go by proof. You're supposed to go by proof.
I disagree with that to a degree because I can't prove every single scientific principle that I do believe in. I believe in peer-reviewed studies. I take faith in peer-reviewed studies that are presented by well-respected scientists. So that does take faith to a certain degree, but believing in those things adds a certain value into my life when I take a biology class. Whereas believing in Christ doesn't necessarily add any value to my life when I'm in any of my other scientific classes. It's something, like you said, that's outside of everything else that you can believe with your five senses.
As an atheist, you have to say everything is material. So you say, I live by proof with the material. I live by it's empirically studied. As soon as you hop into, I make these faith positions about human nature being, I want to be fulfilled, I want to have satisfaction, I believe I reason, like you're reasoning right now, I believe that humans have value, I believe that I have a free will. Now you're stepping outside of what an atheist is supposed to be consistent with when it comes to their worldview. Because you're making these leaps right now that you're not supposed to be making if you're an atheist. I mean, do you reason right now? Are you reasoning? Because I said you're reasoning. Maybe I don't know. Maybe you're not reasoning. Maybe I'm not reasoning well. Are you reasoning right now?
Yeah, I would say I'm reasoning.
Why would you think you're reasoning from an atheistic perspective?
Because my neurons are firing, I'm having a discussion, I'm speaking back.
Yeah, but you came from simply a highly evolved monkey. You're going to trust the mind of a monkey when it comes to reasoning?
I didn't come from a monkey. I shared in ancestral...
Fine, you came as an accident, a total accident. So you came from the irrational, and you're telling me all of a sudden you're here as a rational human being, seeking after things like truth and the immaterial.
Yeah, I think rationality comes from complexity. So at the end of the day, I am still just a bunch of atoms together.
Excellent.
Irrational atoms.
Excellent. So you're saying then, we'll go by Occam's razor, deciding the most simplistic response. You're saying to me, you just said I'm a very complex individual and rationality came from complexity.
Yes.
So are you telling me then that there's more evidence behind the complexity coming from non-complexity, which is just emptiness, a total void, and we get complexity and then our reasoning capabilities? Or is there more evidence and is it more sensical to understand that we came from a God who created everything, who has tremendous complexity in creativity, he is omnipotent, he is omniscient, and created us as reasoning human beings who have complexity, so much complexity that a DNA strand is 6 feet long, and if you took all of our DNA strands, you could go back to the sun and back 200 times. And if there's the tiniest piece of misinformation within a single DNA strand, you would be handicapped. I mean, the chances of that are so slim, and yet, obviously, we have many handicapped people. And yet, you are developed with that type of complexity, and you're telling me that you just came from primordial soup and somehow became that complex? Just because time, supposedly. You get more time, and things get more complex. Yet again, there is zero evidence to that, unless there is something guiding the process. Unless there is a mechanism behind it. If there's a mechanism behind the cell, now you have the opportunity to duplicate and create things that are more complex, like your handsome body. But you have no creator, you have no mechanism, all you have is time, and supposedly with time, we go from primordial soup, nothing, and nothing created that primordial soup, by the way, to all of a sudden this level of complexity where you're studying this level of philosophy, trying to seek after truth with me. Where is there more evidence to? Would it make sense more so with the creator, who's complex, or with just nothing and you popped up out of nowhere by chance?
Well, so you're saying that we both believe in non-complexities turning into complex things over
No, I don't believe that.
a period of time.
No, because God is outside of space and time.
Okay.
God is infinite, and you need an infinite creator to start space and time. A big bang has to have a great banger.
Yeah.
Big bang, big banger. When somebody closes that door, there's going to be a big bang. Somebody open it, and it's going to close.
Yeah.
So somebody had to open it. Right? So I do not believe that complexity just came from nothing, remember? So if you're a magician and I'm a magician, we both come and pull off a magic trick, well, at least I'm here pulling the bunny out of the hat. You have nobody pulling the bunny out of the hat. The bunny is just coming out of the hat.
Yeah, I would say after a long enough time, the bunny would come out of the hat. Because if you have many, many scenarios where, say, I mean, we know just how many planets there are in the universe. And most of them are dead and don't have life. Most of them are completely barren. And to look at just this one planet and say, look at us, we're so lucky, what are the odds of this happening?
Yeah.
Well, it didn't happen many, many billions and trillions of times before it did happen. So I would argue that if you do wait a long enough time, funky things do happen. You know, atoms do squish together and create chemicals that are more complex, and they do that over and over until things get even more and more complex, and then you start having water, and then you have basic life, and you have complex life. I think that over a long enough time span, that stuff does naturally occur without a creator kind of driving it forward.
You as an atheist believe non-existence produced existence. That's a miracle. Non-existence does not produce existence. The problem is, if you're an atheist, you don't have a miracle worker. If you're an atheist, you believe chaos produced order. That's a miracle. But the problem is, if you're an atheist, you have no miracle worker. If you're an atheist, you believe non-life produced life. The problem is, if you're an atheist, you don't have a miracle worker to pull off that miracle of non-life producing life. If you're an atheist, you believe non-reason produced reason. That's a miracle. But if you're an atheist, you don't have a miracle worker. If you're an atheist, you believe meaning comes from matter. That's a miracle. But you don't have a miracle worker. If you're an atheist, you believe that matter produces morality. That's a stinking miracle. But you don't have a miracle worker. If I have a worldview that is incapable of explaining the basic fundamental building blocks of my life, I better reject my worldview. My worldview, my view of reality, better conform to my experience of reality. Otherwise, I'm in deep, deep doo-doo. Because I'm believing something that does not conform to reality.
Matter came from nothing, but nothing came from nothing millions and millions and millions of times before matter came from nothing. And matter led to something more complex just once, just a few times, but matter led to just that same matter thousands and thousands and thousands of times. And that's why we have all these dead, lifeless planets, millions and billions and trillions of them, and we have only one Earth that has complex life on it. Because countless, countless times we saw that failure. So to call ourselves a miracle isn't necessarily the case if there has been these millions and billions, super large numbers, amounts of failure in order for us to exist in the way that we do now, in order for rational beings to exist.
If I'm dealing in poker, and if I'm dealing, and in 4 games in a row, I deal myself all aces. If the other players around the table say, hey, Cliff, you're cheating. And I say, no, I haven't cheated. I just dealt myself all aces 4 times in a row. And you've got to realize that if there are an infinite number of universes, we just happen to live in a universe where I deal myself all aces 4 times in a row. My fellow poker players are not going to say, Oh, wow, Cliff, that's really impressive. My poker players are going to say, you're an idiot, Cliff. We know very, very well that the idea that there are an infinite number of universes and we just so happen by accident to live in a universe where it so happens that when you're dealing cards to yourself, it's all aces in 4 games in a row. It's far more likely that you're cheating, Cliff.
Look, I guess the best way of describing it is there were worlds where we didn't exist. It's just that we didn't exist to say, oh, look, this is one of those many, many examples where we don't exist. So it makes sense that we're going to live in what seems like a miracle, because the only time that we could ever live and look back on that and say, oh, that's a miracle, is the one time that it actually happened. If things didn't come together to perfectly create rational life, there were no rational beings to say, hey, look, things didn't perfectly come together to create rational life. This is just one of those many, many times.
If there are 10 expert marksmen standing where he is, I'm here, and they all fire at me, and they all miss, there obviously was a plot. There obviously was a conspiracy. These 10 marksmen decided, we're going to miss Cliff. And for me to say, well, the reason I'm here is because I'm here, that doesn't cut it, sir. So for me to say, the only thing that comes from nothing is nothing. You never get something coming from nothing, except it happened this time. Sir, Julie Andrews, that great thinker in Mary Poppins, puts it beautifully when she sings, nothing comes from nothing. Nothing ever could. You can't get something from nothing. If you got nothing, you're not going to get something out of it. Now, earlier you mentioned miracles. A miracle is not a denial of scientific laws. A miracle is a statement that goes along the following. You and I are standing under an apple tree. 100 times out of 100, if that apple disengages from that branch, it's going to hit the ground, right? Gravity will pull it to the ground. Unless you and I reach out and grab the falling apple, then it is not going to hit the ground, is it? That is not a denial of the law of gravity. Instead, that is an introduction into the equation of a hand. The hand catches the apple. The law of gravity does not suck the apple to the ground. The apple is in my hand. A miracle is the introduction of a hand. A miracle is not, oh, the laws of science are stupid. Oh, we're just going to change the law of gravity. That's not what a miracle is. A miracle is a statement. There's a supernatural God who intervenes in a situation. For instance, I believe that Mary was a virgin. That does not mean that for 9 months God performed miracles in Mary's womb. No, there was an initial miracle. A woman conceived without having sex with a man. But then there were 9 months of baby Jesus growing in that woman's womb, totally naturally, according to all the laws of nature. So this is not a denial of the laws of nature, but it is a statement that there's a supernatural God who intervenes and performs a miracle.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching this episode. Hit that subscribe button. We'd love for you to join the family. Also, want to invite you to our church in New Canaan, Connecticut. It's New Canaan High School, and it meets Sundays at 9:30 a.m.